Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be talking about the final chapter in the Violator vs. Badrock miniseries with Violator vs. Badrock number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. Before we get started today, I would like to bring up the fact that I am dealing with some allergy issues at the moment, and if you notice my voice sounding a little bit on the raspy side, that's why, and I do apologize. First published in August of 1995, we can see here on the cover Badrock in his brand new costume holding up the disembodied head of the Violator. Spoiler alert, this doesn't actually happen inside of the comic. And you might be thinking to yourself, hey Bo, doesn't make this like a clickbaity type of thumbnail? And yeah, it does. And you can blame Rob Liefeld for that, for drawing this image and this cover back in 1995. Writer, Alan Moore. Penciler, Brian Denham. Inkers, Jonathan Sabal, Danny Miki. Colors, Color Separations, Extreme Colors. Letterer, Bill Oakley. Editor, Eric Stevenson. Badrock created by Rob Liefeld. Violator created by Todd McFarlane. And that brings up a good point. Extreme Colors makes more than a few kind of glaring mistakes throughout the book that I'll get to as we get to them. And there's also several continuity errors that probably should have been picked up by Eric Stevenson that weren't. But again, I'll address them when we get to them. This book, of course, picks up exactly where issue number 3 left off. We see Badrock standing in the doorway of the Institute, wondering exactly what his next move should be as Dr. McAllister has ventured out on her own into the 8th Circle of Hell to try and collect samples for her research. And Badrock realizes that it's up to him to save her, but he also can't just leave the facility unguarded with all of the demons and monsters running around. And again, he's also working on a time limit as the angel Celestine is quickly deteriorating as the last bits of her power are keeping the Institute firmly planted in the 8th Circle of Hell. So Badrock decides to go back up to his room and open the package that he received all the way back in issue number 1 that houses his new costume, stating that the new costume itself probably won't make any real difference in terms of his ability to fight the demons of hell and save everyone who's counting on him, but it will at least make him look cool, or at least he thinks so in his mind, as he walks back down to the lobby in his new costume, surprising everyone. Also, I really like this guy down here being all kind of stunned, but he's also a janitor who's like still trying to mop the floors and stuff, despite the fact that they've already been attacked by demons and the entire Institute has been transported to hell and walls have been broken down and the ceilings collapsed in places. And this guy, meanwhile, is still trying to just do his job throughout the entirety of all this. Badrock asks one of the researchers what she thinks of his new costume, and she simply states, well, it's very you. Badrock states, hey, that's what I thought too. And then he tells her and the rest of them that he's going to go find Dr. McAllister and that they should all keep the doors shut to the facility while he's gone. However, they quickly protest, stating that if he leaves, they're completely defenseless against not only the Violator, but all of his brothers as well, and along with all the other monsters that are roaming around the 8th Circle of Hell, they'd be in some pretty dire straits if Badrock leaves them all unprotected. However, Badrock states that he's going to take the dimensional guidance sphere along with him to lure both the Violator and his brothers away as he leaves in search for Dr. McAllister. However, this doesn't sit well with the other researchers as they realize that the dimensional guidance sphere is their only way back to Earth. Now, here's something I'd like to point out that will come into play both currently and later on in the story. You will notice that Badrock's new costume, as it's depicted on this first page here, well, I guess second page, has no sleeves. It's just bare arms in a type of tank top. However, we see down here on the next panel that it's supposed to be blue. They already screwed that up, making his pants red. And they also made the shirt disappear entirely as he's only got the shoulder pads on in this depiction. And it doesn't really get better from here, folks. These mistakes keep on coming the further you get into the book. Badrock then opens the doors to the facility and calls out to Violator, stating, "Hey, Ugly, I'm leaving, and I'm taking this dimensional guidance sphere with me. And in case you didn't realize, this is the only thing that's going to get us in the Institute back to Earth once Celestine's powers are exhausted. And if you want to get back to Earth, you're going to need this to do it." He also then states, "Hey, this is a real nice neighborhood around here. I could just about live here forever, couldn't you?" As we see Violator looking down from the rooftop of the facility as he watches Badrock venture out into the 8th circle of hell. At this point, Violator realizes that Badrock is making a good point, and that he has no way of getting back to Earth without that sphere, and he definitely doesn't want to stay in the 8th circle of hell. As he states it, there's no upward mobility, and he's got a good thing going on Earth, and he doesn't want to squander that by being stranded in the 8th circle. He then realizes that Badrock's a little bit smarter than he gave him credit for, and blames his underestimation of Badrock on being around his brothers, as he states that he's around those guys for a few minutes, and suddenly he starts to think that everybody's as dumb as they are. We also see now that Badrock's costume suddenly has sleeves, so again, more of the mistakes with the new costume and the coloration, and just some of the artwork in general. Again, get used to it, because it's throughout the entirety of this issue. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening between Badrock and the Violator, his brothers are still trying to get their bearings after being somewhat handily defeated by Badrock and technically also the Violator, as we see the Vaporizer trying to get to his feet, asking if he was unconscious. The Vacillator tells him that he was indeed, and that he was actually laying on top of him. As they get to their feet, Vaporizer looks over to see Vandalizer and still the Vindicator stuck down his throat, as he tells them that they've got to try and figure out what's going on, as they look over and suddenly notice their brother, the Violator, is walking out into the 8th circle, and decide that they need to follow him and discover what he's up to. Meanwhile, not far off, we see Dr. McAllister as she surveys the bleakness of the 8th circle of hell, trying to document her findings on a small recording device, as she tries to figure out what things are different about this place in terms of the landscape and the flora and the fauna, as she picks up the skull of some sort of dead creature to try and investigate it further. She is suddenly snuck up on from behind by something that she wasn't intending to run into, and probably would have been better off had she not. As she turns around, Dr. McAllister is confronted by 2 new demonic life forms that we've never seen in the pages of Spawn or any corresponding Spawn stories before. These things are called Hyper Shrimp, and apparently they're from the 2nd sphere of hell. They've apparently come down to the 8th sphere to do some hunting of some unique individuals, one of which being Dr. McAllister herself, as they plan on skinning her alive. Dr. McAllister immediately tries to run away, however she's grabbed by one of the Hyper Shrimp's tentacles and pulled back as the Hyper Shrimp holds its blade to her throat, trying to debate and figure out why exactly they're always drawn to presumably attractive human females, and why they're always trying to kill them instead of any other type of human life form, but that perhaps it's because their skin is always in the best condition of any of the humans that they run into. And this, of course, doesn't sit well with Dr. McAllister, as she begins to panic and screams out for someone to please help her. However, just in the nick of time, the Hyper Shrimp that has a hold of Dr. McAllister has its head completely exploded by a grenade that is launched from one of the shoulder pads of Badrock's costume, which it's hilarious that his ridiculous Rob Liefeld shoulder pads actually house grenade launchers, but at least they serve a function in this instance. Badrock states, "Your pate, pal. Come on, Dr. McAllister, let's get back to the Institute." However, he fails to notice the Hyper Shrimp that is approaching him from behind, trying to avenge his companion. Dr. McAllister, however, warns him as Badrock reaches over his shoulder and just punches the Hyper Shrimp in the face, shattering the globe around its head, and making note that the liquid that was inside of the helmet of this Hyper Shrimp is freezing cold, almost as if it's like liquid nitrogen or something, which I found to be kind of an odd observation. It doesn't actually play into any more of the story other than this, just like this part of it, but it was unique that they would have thought to add this in and make note of a new creature having this type of thing going on with it, especially given that we've never seen this creature before at all, and I don't know that we ever really see him again very much, quite frankly. Still somewhat discombobulated by the whole experience, we see Dr. McAllister getting her glasses and trying to get her bearings, get back up to her feet, and she asks Badrock, what the heck were those things? Badrock responds by stating, how the hell should I know? Some kind of seafood that went to college? Sally, how could you just go out and, put yourself in danger like this? Dr. McAllister responds by stating, this is scientific history in the making and I needed to collect samples. And then also reminds Badrock that her name is Dr. McAllister. Badrock says fine, but that he doesn't want to be history just yet and that they need to get back to the Institute. At this point, Dr. McAllister realizes that Badrock has the dimensional guidance sphere with him and asks exactly what he's doing. He then informs her of his plan, that he was coming out to save her, and use the guidance sphere as a means to try and lure the Violator and his brothers out after him instead of putting the people in the Institute in peril. This, however, doesn't sit well with Dr. McAllister, as she states, how could you put the entire Institute at risk just to try and save me? Badrock responds by stating, well, I thought you might be grateful of the fact that I came out here to try and help you. I mean, you're just walking around in this maggot-filled hellscape of a world. However, we notice a hand bursting up out of the ground, and then suddenly they are both surprised by the appearance of the Violator, who is not too happy about the description that Badrock just gave of his home, stating, hey, what the hell do you know about where I grew up? This is a nice neighborhood, you goddamn tourist. This, of course, is not exactly part of Badrock's plan in the sense that he was hoping to not have to deal with the Violator head on. As Dr. McAllister states, well, you lured him after you, what's the second part of your plan? And Badrock responds, well, I hadn't really come up with the second part just yet, which seems very classically Badrock and kind of gives us a good explanation of why he's not in a leadership role on the Youngblood team if this is the way that he tries to handle missions and objectives. As Violator launches his attack on the two of them, he does happen to state at this point, and this is how we find out about the Hyper Shrimp, that the two demons that Badrock just killed were in fact Hyper Shrimp, and that he's actually rather appreciative of the fact that Badrock killed both of them, as apparently the Hyper Shrimp are not very well liked on the 8th sphere of hell, as the inhabitants of the 8th sphere believe that the Hyper Shrimp are just a bunch of conceited jerks and they don't like them very much. He is in the middle of telling Badrock that he wants the sphere because he wants to get to a place less damned than this, and if he can't, he'd at least like to get back to Washington. Fun little joke about Washington being a hellish place. At this point, Badrock states, what's the matter? Are there more people after your blood here in hell than on Earth? He then states back to Badrock, listen, just give me the sphere. Badrock, however, refuses and instead throws the sphere to Dr. McAllister and tells her to catch. Dr. McAllister, however, isn't really exactly sure what she's supposed to be doing with it. However, Violator states that all she needs to do is hand the sphere over to him because he's tired of playing games and he wants to get the heck out of the 8th sphere of hell. However, just as Violator is about to grab the sphere from Dr. McAllister, they're interrupted by none other than his brothers, who have finally caught up and are ready to once again take the fight to the Violator, stating that they're going to whoop his butt. As they surround him, the Violator pleads for them to stop, stating, listen guys, I gotta get back to Earth. I've got a really good thing going back there. Everybody loves me. I've got action figures and everything, which is admittedly kind of a funny fourth wall breaking joke. As we see Dr. McAllister still clutching the sphere, we then see the Vandalizer with the Vindicator still down his throat, telling his brother that he believes that he's been carrying too much of the load in this situation and that they should switch places. So he leans forward so that the Vindicator can get his footing. However, the Vindicator then, once he stands up, informs his brother that, With his head stuck down his throat, he can't see where he's going, and he's going to need his brother to direct him on exactly where the Violator is and how they can get to the fight. Realizing that this is their opportunity to once again make their escape, Badrock leans over to Dr. McAllister and tells her that they need to hurry up and get back to the Institute ASAP while they still can. As the two of them begin to run back towards the Institute, Badrock states that he can't wait to get back to Earth and put this whole nightmarish experience behind them. However, Dr. McAllister questions whether or not the experience was all that nightmarish. She's actually been having the time of her life throughout all of these horrors because of the scientific implications, stating that, this is an absolute dream for me. There's all these new entirely undiscovered life forms that are from a completely different dimension. And, I want to understand how they live, how they reproduce. What are their digestive systems like? And Badrock reminds her that, hey, I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm supposed to be keeping you safe from those things. And then Dr. McAllister rebuttals by stating, don't you see any of the scientific implications? These things even speak English. And then Badrock is kind of losing his patience at this point as he states, yeah, they do, but apparently you don't, because that over there is the Institute. And if we don't get back there right now with that sphere, then it's not going to be there anymore, and we're going to be stuck here forever. So maybe get your ass in gear. At this point, Dr. McAllister realizes that Badrock is right as she finally relents and goes with him back to the Institute. The other researchers and members of the Institute who are inside see them coming back and are quite happy that they're back safely. Badrock makes sure that everyone inside is still okay and then asks them how the angel powering the interdimensional unit is doing. They inform him that she's not doing well as she's basically ground down to dust and all that's left is essentially just her knuckle bones. As Badrock and Dr. McAllister start to walk around the rest of the facility, making sure that everything's in order and, trying to survey the damage, they realize that the place is pretty messed up. And Badrock even states, man, there's going to be a whole lot of cleanup necessary to get this place up and running again. Dr. McAllister states, yeah, that's correct. And honestly, I can't wait to get this place running again so that we can get back to business. However, this doesn't sit well with Badrock as he kind of, starts to question her again, stating, are you really going to keep going through with this experiment and this line of work, knowing exactly what it leads to? However, at this point, she doesn't get a chance to respond because they're interrupted once again by a familiar voice from behind. Also, we see here that Badrock's shoulder pads have suddenly disappeared and that one of his sleeves is torn up. We don't know how. The last time we saw him when Violator knocked him down, none of this damage to his costume existed, and now it's suddenly all here, as if he's been in a long, drawn-out battle when literally he just got knocked over by the Violator one time, and now apparently his costume looks like this, I guess? The Violator wastes no time in jumping on top of Badrock, attacking him once again, stating, I'm not letting this facility leave without me, and you didn't really think that my half-wit brothers were going to hold me for long, did you? Badrock is starting to really lose his patience at this point, stating, God, this is getting monotonous. However, Violator throws him to the ground and starts to kind of get the upper hand as he decides that he's had enough of Badrock and he's going to deal with him the same way he deals with everyone else by ripping his heart clean out. As he continues to taunt Badrock, Badrock reaches out for the only weapon at his disposal, which is the staff that was used by the Angel Celestine to attack the facility in the first place. He then picks the staff up and points it straight into the face of the Violator, stating, "Eat me." On the next page, we see that Badrock is somehow back on his feet, even though he was literally just pinned to the ground by the Violator. And he now has the staff in both hands and unleashes a blast that hits the Violator square in the chest. Which again doesn't make sense because on the previous page, the staff was pointed directly at the Violator's face right between the eyes. The blast is so powerful that it knocks the Violator out of the hole that was in the wall of the facility that he entered through, which it seems like it probably should have killed him, especially given that this weapon was supposedly designed to be used specifically against hell creatures. Again, remember, the Angel Celestine use this weapon to specifically hunt Spawn with and also kill demons with. So it seems kind of strange that the Violator would be able to so easily weather a direct attack point blank from it. However, at this moment, we see that the air around all of the characters starts to sparkle inside of the facility as the power of the Angel Celestine has finally worn off, and the Institute suddenly vanishes from the 8th sphere of hell and goes back to Earth. Unfortunately for the Violator, he was not inside or on top of the facility when this happened, and he is now stranded in the 8th sphere of hell. As he says, "Oh, come on, guys, you gotta come back. Like, what am I supposed to do here? I could become antisocial or develop other bad personality traits. And what's Spawn supposed to do without me? I'm practically the guy's only friend. What if he's gonna miss me?" And at this point, Violator is contacted by some others who are right behind him. Of course, these are his brothers, who state, "Yeah, Spawn might miss you, but we won't," as we see the Violator shocked that he's going to have to once again deal with fighting his brothers. And this, once again, brings up the same issues that I've been addressing in my videos on the ongoing Spawn series. You can check those out on my Spawn playlist if you like. That this miniseries doesn't make any sense, because if Violator is stranded in hell, then how is he supposed to be fighting Spawn in the sewers and striking up deals with Jason Wynn to try and use Wynn to his advantage to outsmart Spawn and make his life a living nightmare? None of this makes sense. The whole Violator miniseries, or Violator versus Badrock miniseries, throws a huge wrench in the mainline story of the Spawn ongoing series. Back in Washington, D.C., we get an epilogue where we see that Badrock and Dr. McAllister have made it back safely with the Institute and everyone else inside. As Badrock states, I guess you won't be carrying out any more of your experiments now that the demon that you were using to power your machine is no longer here. McAllister says, for the moment, I guess that is the case. And then Badrock takes the opportunity to try and shoot his shot, asking Dr. McAllister if she wants to go and grab a meal with him, asking her on a date. And she starts to accept when the two of them are suddenly interrupted by a man in a suit, stating, "Oh, Mr. Badrock, thank God I found you. There's some trouble at the Institute. You brought back something from hell." And Badrock starts to argue with the man a little, stating, "But I was just about to," and then he's interrupted by Dr. McAllister, who states, "Oh, it's no worries. I got tons of field notes I got to write up anyways. See you later." And then the man states, "Well, it's kind of weird. It's not a demon or anything, but it is some big, jacked up, muscly dude covered in guns who keeps talking about some guy he's trying to find named Roosevelt and how he's going to admonish him." And Badrock states, "Well, that seems really weird." And the man tells him, "Yeah, but it's a good thing we got guys like you who are superheroes that can help us out." And Badrock responds saying, "Well, you know what they say, with great responsibility comes great pains in my ass," as we reach the end of the story. And we find out that our old buddy, the Admonisher, somehow was able to make it back to Earth on the Institute. And, well, that's kind of the end of the story for this entire miniseries. We then get an advertisement for the Glory and Evangeline team-up comic and the Violator vs. Badrock trade paper, both coming from Image Comics in the near future. Of course, both of these things exist now because this is from 30 years ago. We then get a 2-page ad for the Prophet and Evangeline team-up hardbound trade paper. Now, as far as I'm aware, this was never released in single issues. It was only released in an original hardback format. I've never come across one of these, but I sure would like to get my hands on one because it seems like it would be kind of cool. And I am actually a pretty big fan of Prophet. But then again, I don't know how well it's sold because, like I said, I've never seen one of these out in the wild, and I'd certainly hope to run into one someday because if I do, I'm definitely buying it. On the next page, we then see an advertisement for the Grifter and Badrock miniseries team-up comic. I don't know if I have all of these. I might only have 1 or 2 of these issues. I'll have to double check and see what I've got of that. We then get an advertisement for the Berserkers miniseries, which I'm pretty sure I have literally none of, and Bloodpool, which I have 2 or 3 issues of. I'm gonna have to really go through my collection, see what I've got, and make a note of what I need to find before I can start making videos on any of this stuff. But once I get it all secured, I promise I will eventually get around to making videos on everything you see in these ads. We then get 2 pages of Extreme Scene, which is just profiles on people who work for Extreme Studios. This one is on Donald Skinner. Now, I found this kind of interesting, as Donald Skinner essentially got a job working at Extreme Studios through Danny Meeke. He and Danny were friends, and Danny told him that Extreme was hiring and that they needed colorists. So this is the crazy part. Apparently, Donald Skinner had not really done anything with like digital coloring before. So he literally just went out and bought a computer and the software he needed to be able to do it, and then taught himself how to do it so that he could go and then apply for the job with Extreme Studios. And he ended up getting the job. It probably didn't hurt that Danny Meeke, I'm sure, put in a good word for him, given that they were friends and Danny already worked there. But I just kind of found it cool that this guy was just like, yeah, I'm going to just drop a few $100 on a PC, teach myself how to do digital coloring, and then just go get a job at a comic book studio. Now, hopefully, this wasn't one of the projects he worked on, because as you can see throughout this book, there's a lot of different coloring mistakes, and I prefer to hope that Donald Skinner wasn't the one responsible for them. On the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for Maximage, and I can say with 100% certainty that I have never in my life come across a single issue of Maximage. If I ever do, I'll buy it so I can make a video on it, but I'm not holding my breath either, because I gotta be honest, I'm a guy who lives in dollar bins. And for as much sifting as I've done through those, and to have never come across a single issue of this book means that there ain't many of them floating around out there, because I certainly would have come across it if there were. But like I said, fingers crossed, maybe I'll get one and I can do a video on it for the channel. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the Youngblood collectible trading card game from Caliber Game Systems. I've never seen these before ever. I've never talked to anyone who's ever played this game. If you happen to have played this game, feel free to tell me about it in the comment section, because I'd like to know about it. Let me know what your opinions were about it, if it was any good, if you ever knew anyone else who had played it, or where the heck you even bought this from. Because like I said, I've never really seen this before. I don't recall seeing a lot of ads for it. I can't imagine it did very well, but like I said, if you somehow were one of the handful of people who bought these cards and played this game, I want to know about it. Talk about it in the comments below. I really hope that you do. And that was Violator versus Badrock number 4. And it's fine, I guess. Overall, I went into this miniseries thinking to myself that I didn't really like it that much, but it had been so long since I read it that I thought, maybe I'll give it another chance, look at it through a fresh set of eyes, and maybe I was being too harsh on it before. And after reading it again, I don't think I was. It's not that good. Not in my opinion, anyway. It just feels like there's so much lacking in this miniseries from what we had in the original Violator miniseries, where we got this really kind of off-the-wall dark humor, and there was just something fun and weird and unique about that miniseries, whereas this miniseries just feels rushed and cobbled together. It doesn't really feel like Badrock belongs all that well in the story, or that he even really fits into the Spawn mythos very well. And, maybe this is my own bias, but I've never personally found Badrock to be the most compelling or unique of the Youngblood team. And I feel like had it been another member, that maybe they could have done more with this story. I don't know. Like I said, I just feel like the whole thing just seems so blasé, as if it's missing something, or that maybe they just didn't put that much, heart and soul into this story. And I guess that would be on Alan Moore, but the artwork suffers too. There's so many, panels with no backgrounds and mistakes in the drawing and the coloring. It just feels like the whole thing was just kind of this shameless cash grab, and that nobody really put that much effort into it. But then again, these are just my opinions. Your opinions may be completely different. You might love this series and think that they did nothing wrong, that the whole thing was fantastic. And if that's the case, it's okay, because everybody's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.